Hello, I'm Cheryl Meyer, and I'm otherwise known as Cheryl M. Health Muse. And what my goal is to inspire you to lead a healthier life. So when I proposed my podcast, I proposed that we present it in two different segments. The first one is It Feels Good to Feel Good, Future Proof Your Health, where I get to share everything I have learned to return my health back to relative wellness and to live a pain-free life in spite of the fact that I have autoimmune disease. But the second part of my podcast is this episode, and that's Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in. My concept with this is it's all fine and well that you hear me tell my story, but I get a lot of, it's all fine and well that it worked for you, but it's not going to work for me. And I wanted you to hear that there are lots of people out there that have made changes in their lifestyle that have supported their health and brought them back to relative wellness. We all have a couple things in common. We all owned our own health. Whatever the doctor was suggesting we did was going on a parallel path to us making these lifestyle changes where we did things that cleaned up our toxic load. We all pay attention to our body. You'll hear jazz in the background because I want you to listen to the rhythm of your health, and I want you to pay attention to what your body is telling you. My body had been trying to tell me that I was going to topple over into toxic load for some time. I just wasn't listening. So if you clean up your lifestyle and if you listen to your body, you have a very good chance not of being deprived in any way, but returning to feeling darn good. And that's what these podcasts are really all about. So thank you for joining me. This is going to be a Tell Me Your Story, the Health Muse is in episode, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope that we all inspire you to lead a healthier, happier life. Thank you. Okay, hello. I am so excited to be here today with someone I have now known for 3 years, and her name is Miriam Richard. And I knew she was going to be one of my first guests because we wrote our first books together, and I was so impressed with her book. And she's done amazing things since we wrote our books together. So I want to introduce you to Miriam Richard, and let me tell you quickly, she wrote a book called Gut Feeling, Gut Healing that was not only about troubles that she had with her health, but became self-defense for her son who had Crohn's disease. And it was really important for her to share what she had learned about getting her son healthy. And he is thriving today and off at college. So it's like great. And then she went and she did something rather incredible. So I'm going to hold on to that until we get through the health history and what she did to help her son and herself. And then we'll end with that because it will make you smile. And she did something that no one else has ever done. So I want to introduce you to my friend, Miriam. God, am I emotional today? Sorry.
Cheryl and I are, I guess, soul sisters. When we were meeting and discussing our paths and how they were long and tedious to several doctors of figuring out what's going on, what's wrong, and then to finally find some of the, both of us were deep diving researchers and self-advocates, and I learned about what's a belly button wand from our friend Cheryl here. So you have to to find out all about that. But she has all of the great tips for toxins in her book, wrapping your food with beeswax type of paper. But for my story, I had been a gymnast in college and had a knee injury and wanting to compete like all gymnasts want to do, and not feeling pain as much because you always were ripping the skin off your hand. You learned to ignore pain. I took 4 Advil 4 times a day for 9 months. Yes, well, I heard that your liver eats Advil like candy, but apparently your kidneys don't. So I did continue with gymnastics, but I think it wore out my body a little bit, and that I ended up with a really bad neck injury, partly from the actual trick that I was trying to learn, and partly from, I think, that the nutrients wasn't being absorbed by my body from a leaky gut. At the same time, from doing gymnastics, I noticed in high school and college that I would be doubled over in pain for 4 to 6 hours, completely like just sitting like this in pain. And they had sent me home from school one time, even though I didn't want to go home. I wanted to take a test that I had studied for. And everybody told me, well, you have spastic colon. And then in college, they said, I went to the medical doctor. They said, you have gas pains. They took x-rays and said, gas pains are the worst. Like, wow, I've had, a couple of passing gas before, but I've never had anything like this. I did have episodes where I had difficulty going to the restroom. Might be constipation for 2 or 3 days, maybe no more than 5, but a couple times it was bad. So taking all the medication, I think, gave me a leaky gut, and I had been diagnosed with almost fibromyalgia. I didn't have quite all the trigger points that you had to have, but most of them. And then later on, interstitial cystitis, which is a bladder pain. And I would wake up in the middle of the night and use the restroom, and I would burn so bad, like as if I had a bladder infection, for almost 3 hours, unless I took, guess what, Advil. And then I could fall back to sleep about 35 minutes later and then go back to bed. So that was not the best for me. However, I did end up watching a movie called Super Size Me, which I think a lot of people had heard about in the time. And then shortly thereafter, Food Matters. And Food Matters was an eye-opening movie that was written by people that went to the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. It so happens that that's where Cheryl and I actually met, was through the Institute of Integrative Nutrition. So the Food Matters video talks about vitamin C in huge quantities, IV, maybe 120,000 milligrams, I think. And then they talked about niacin for mental health. It just blew my mind. They said they literally had a person over in the corner, and they gave him enough niacin that then he engaged with the family. And then the doctor said, well, isn't that quite a bit of niacin? And so they talked the family out of giving him the niacin, and he was back in the corner instead taking prescription drug, which just blows my mind. I was also introduced to the Garrison therapy through Food Matters, and then the term superfoods from David Wolfe. So the Gerson therapy is a protocol on fresh juices and enzymes and coffee enemas, and just decreasing your stress and being outside, and I think it's almost all raw food and no animal products. And these people are saying, and I just believe them 100%, that your body wants to heal. It heals your cuts.
I believe that.
It heals your scrapes. It just needs the nutrients and the safe space to do so. And so that really just touched me deeply. And I joined the Institute of Integrative Nutrition, as you heard. And then later, they encourage you to learn about different eating styles and try to think logically. You've been told, okay, no carbs might be bad, or cholesterol might be bad. And then, of course, I was jumping on the bandwagon back in high school and took these SnackWell's cookies that didn't have any cholesterol. And I didn't believe them. I thought it was fake advertising. But sure enough, one time I went to the doctor and they took my cholesterol levels and they said, your cholesterol is 108 total cholesterol. And they said, if it goes below 100, you'll have permanent brain damage. I had no idea. We all thought we're supposed to get rid of our cholesterol. It's bad. Well, apparently that's what your brain is made out of, and all your hormones.
Right. You need cholesterol. And that whole thing came because the sugar industry demonized fat. And so all those low fat things came out that we thought were good for us when we were eating them, but they ended up being really bad for us.
Exactly. And cholesterol is actually how you make your vitamin D. So if you don't have cholesterol, if you're on a statin drug, even if you spend time in the sun, your body won't be able to make your vitamin D. Just a tip that I learned on the way. So let's see, we joined IIN. Life was going pretty well. I met with a naturopath. I still had this chronic neck pain that I'd been seeing a chiropractor for and an acupuncturist. But I was learning to clean up the diet. And I was saying the really neat thing about IIN was they taught you to think logically, like sometimes your cure is in your backyard, like dandelions. We thought they were weeds, but their roots go down 2 feet. They get more nutrients than a head of lettuce or many other items that we happen to eat, carrots, etc. And so they said, what if you lived in the North Pole? Would you thrive on tropical fruit? Probably not.
No.
And what if you lived on the equator? Would you thrive on whale blubber and reindeer meat?
Probably not.
Probably not. So you just start to think, wait a second, maybe we shouldn't eat local in order to not put pollution across the ocean and such. Maybe we should eat local because that's what survives where I'm living, and I want to survive also. So those were huge things for me. And my son had ADD, and he had psoriasis from a young age. And I have 2 sons and a daughter, but my middle son had these complications. And shortly after I had joined IIN and gotten my degree, I ended up on a Father's Day bent over in pain again. One of those gymnastics, oh, you have gas pain episodes. Just happened to last over 6 hours. And people were saying, I was actually stuck for 3 hours in one spot with one knee bent up and one leg out on the dock, and the kids were swimming around. I literally couldn't even move. I was in so much pain. And I was like, what on earth could this possibly be? And I had only done some Jane Fonda type exercise. I might have done a handstand before that. But it ended up, we had a lot of pain in my upper left quadrant, and my sister-in-law came out and said, well, what if it was an appendix? And I'm like, an appendix? Isn't that your lower right quadrant? Okay. But she goes, well, my friend's appendix ruptured and she had to run to the emergency room. I'm like, we are an hour from Dallas. It's been 6 hours. I have a medical background in physical therapy, and I would be not setting a good example to my children if I ignored something that's this big that even the sister-in-law doesn't know anything, said it might be her appendix. I better go check it out. So we went back to Dallas. What's interesting is my son came with us, and he had an earache from jumping off the high dock, and he was supposed to fly to Guatemala the next week, and I was too. So we went to the emergency room. He went and got seen for his earache so he'd be able to fly. I got seen, and the doctor said, well, I don't think it's your appendix, but you sure are tender. Maybe it's a ruptured ovarian cyst. I think I'm like, well, will I make it through the night? Because I was, by this time, breathing labor type breathing to make it home, which is pretty intense pain. And she's like, well, just in case, let's go get a CAT scan. So I get a CAT scan that night, and they said it's either a twisted colon or a ruptured ovarian cyst. And that my treatment was to go home for the next 3 days, mostly lay in bed, only have liquids, and then go see my regular doctor. So I do that, and I go to my regular doctor, and she says, I said, so what do I need to do? I need to go to Guatemala in 5 days. And she said, you're not going anywhere. I'm like, what? She goes, if this is a twisted colon, you're going to die. This could just pop and you're going to die. And I'm like, okay. So I've never been more red carpeted through the system. She said, you won't leave here till you call a GI. And I called a GI that had apparently seen my son way back, when he was 3, and he was already 15. So somehow I was in the system. So I even got red carpeted again, which was rare because it was Thursday evening, and they said, okay, we'll see you on Friday, and we need these tests done. And I'm like, well, I can't do these tests when I called them till the next a week. And they said, no, we're doing them tomorrow morning at the hospital. Be ready, clear out tonight, take these drinks, etc. And sure enough, lying on their table for x-rays, we were supposed to do 25 x-rays. It ended up being an hour and a half, probably 52 x-rays. And it ended up that one of the pictures had my appendix right here going over my transverse colon. And then on the next slide, they would roll me over on the table, and then they would tilt it up or down, and my appendix would be in the lower corner on the left. And then I'd roll to the right, and then it would be over here. So I had a really rare condition called a cerebrovascular, which is a folded up extra colon. So all the problems I had for ADD and constipation and gas pain all my life, that was something I wasn't ever going to overcome on my own. So we went next to, my son went to Guatemala, and then I ended up getting, he came back and came off a plane. So he had that antibiotic for his ear infection, and he had the shots for Guatemala within a month of that time. He probably should have had them 2 months ahead of time, but we just, I don't know, it didn't happen. We did find mercury-free shots, and then he drank unsealed water in Guatemala, which they think sometimes, he was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. When he came home, he got off the plane, doubled over in pain, and was literally crawling into my room. I'm like, how can I help you? I'm on bed rest till my surgery next week, you know? And so this is literally a crazy two weeks for sure. And then my husband takes him to the emergency room, and they said he has a gastritis at this point, and put him on Flagyl. And then I go in to have surgery, and lo and behold, on day 3, I'm starting to walk around, because that's what you're supposed to do. I've had 3 C-sections. I'm a good therapist, and I'm a good patient, and I know what we're supposed to do. And the pain, just all of a sudden that night, I got a fever of 103. The pain was just like, did you leave a sponge in me? Like, what is this pain? I've never had it. And it ended up, I was in the hospital for 14 days. And the day I got out was the day that I got to go outside for the first time. They wouldn't let me off the floor in case I had C. difficile, which is a hospital grade infection that's highly communicable, that causes intense diarrhea. That's, you know, it can kill people over time. I went outside and touched this grass barefoot, and almost in the parking lot at 7 o'clock, because we snuck out. Like, my husband and I planned this little escapade. And then, let's see, we were barefoot in the grass, and we saw the sunrise, and my fever broke that day, which is interesting, because later I learned a whole bunch about the sun, which you would find in my book. So what the rest of our story goes along that Mason got sick again at Christmas. So that was the end of summer. Mason got sick again at Christmas. My sister-in-law got sick on Easter, and she had diverticulitis, and we had to put her in the hospital, and she had to have a foot of her colon removed, which is what they had to do with me. They had to cut out all that stuff that was doing these gymnastics moves inside me every time I rolled over. And then my mother-in-law ended up with a diagnosis of a diverticulitis, and she had to go into the hospital maybe around Mother's Day and be on a liquid diet for 2 weeks. So I'm learning all about gut health. And then my son gets a diagnosis. So at Christmas, he had another episode, and they said it was gastritis again. And then we had gone in May and did one more time. He was still hurting. So we went to the person that he saw from, I guess, I don't know, maybe he saw him too many times for gastritis. He said, we're going to have to do a scope. And so we went in, and they diagnosed him with Crohn's, and they had said, okay, he's still under. The doctor comes out to me. Okay, your kid's 15. He's a freshman in high school. We need to get him on Humira, because that way he didn't have to change anything for the next 7 years until he gets through college. I'm like, back up. Did his food not get him into the situation in the first place, possibly? Like, why would we not want to change everything? I want to change everything. But we had been trained, and so that was very helpful. But I wanted to empower other people what to do. And it ends up, we did all these tests for my son. He actually was really sick that summer. He was in the hospital for emergency room visits 8 times that summer, and total time in hospital plus stays 11 times, because he had certain tests that had to be done in the hospital. And we didn't know that every 2 weeks we'd be on this, oh, here we are. But no, we're in a different county, so we're in a different hospital because we were on vacation and such and so forth. And my big giveaway is we had this giant green folder, and we had learned, because when I was in the hospital, you know, they would take notes of my blood pressure and when was my fever going to break and what did we need to do. And we always recommend that if you have a loved one in the hospital, that somebody stay overnight, to make sure that these nurses are now doing 12-hour shifts. I promise you, they're kind of tapping out at hour 8. You can just see a difference, definitely from 10 to 12 hours. And it doesn't hurt to have a little bit of accountability of what's going on. Even if you couldn't have somebody stay the whole night, if you get somebody there for the last 2 or 3 hours of that nurse's shift, you're gonna help some miscommunications.
And you have to participate in your own health, which is what you learned.
Yes, absolutely. And so I have this beautiful green book, and it is all the stuff that we decided when Mason was going to these different doctors, what we were going to have to do. And we also were going to different countries. We had planned all these vacations, and kids have emotional needs. They have a need to be out, and we had planned a trip for a whole extended family. So we wanted him to be able to do that. And we were like, well, how's that going to happen? And a lot of doctors had told us at one point, you know, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't risk that. And then other doctors said, it's not our patient and it's not really our decision, but they were it was the summer, and that's when you transition to the students from the rounds, from the rotations in July. And so we had some overlap. And so they were like, well, it's not our students, it's not our patient, we can't tell you what to do. And then, but they came through to observe. And then 2 were like, well, we're risk takers, go for it. He's not gonna die, but he might have a foot of his colon taken out. Or like, I just did that and I'm still suffering, and it had been 8 months and I thought I would get well. Well, lo and behold, when we end up doing all this amazing testing for my son, they find out that I actually still had an infection that I only could have gotten from the hospital robotic arm when it was in my intestines, because it's normally something you'd find in a bladder, but that I never was on a catheter or anything like that. So the only way that they could have done it was when they cut me open. So
yeah, actually, medical procedures is one of the largest causes of death, because people get stuff that's unrelated to what they were getting the treatment for.
I believe it.
The statistics are kind of amazing. And it's not that they're not good doctors. It's just sort of what happens. And that's why you have to be an advocate for yourself. And if they're not listening to you, hit them over the head, because they need to hear you.
Right. And I think you have to kind of stand your ground, know a little bit if you can. And that's hard to do. I understand that. But yeah, we have these wonderful tabs in here. And we have tabs that were like doctors' phone numbers, emergency phone numbers. And what I did that I thought was really fun, because it wasn't planned that he was going to be in the hospital that much. It's just by the 3rd visit, we're like, wait. We started actually, as you can see, with these little notes, and we would take notes at the doctor's office, but then we ended up getting these plastic sleeves, because I'm like, how are we going to put all this in one place? And so we said, hey, it's going to look like a kid's school book. And so we put tabs for the doctor's visits, the lab work, the emergency contact phone number.
That was one of the things I really loved about your book, because you kept that book by the back door. Yes. So that if you guys had to go to ER, everything you needed was in that binder. Yes. So that you didn't have to go running around finding things. You could head out the door, you could grab your binder, and you could go. And his entire health history could be accessed from that binder. I thought it was so brilliant.
Thank you.
And you explain how you set up the binder in your book and how useful it was to helping your son through all this.
Oh, we made him a miniature binder to take to college. His goal in life was, I'm going to go out of state to college. And we're like, my friend, you can't stay in the hospital more than 2 weeks. You dream big. We'll see what we have to do to make that happen. You know, he's one of those kids that really loves to dream. And so we actually did some interesting stuff. Some new stuff was coming out during when he was sick. And one of them was the Great American Gut Project. And that was, anyways, you can, we signed up for that. And then I wrote down things I wanted to try. Like I heard, you know, you'll be talking to your friend and you're saying, what happened to Mason? We heard he had Crohn's. I'm like, my brother-in-law, well, they tried fish oil or they tried this probiotic. And so you're like, okay, I don't know what that is. And I'd write it down. And so I made a section that was word of mouth or alternative treatments, or somebody said, oh, there's a government trial. Why don't you join that? So I have a tab for government trials. Does my kid qualify? What do we have to do to be ready? So that I would be ready, because I told him, you won't ever go through what I went through. And with a Crohn's diagnosis, it's about a 75% chance that you'll have part of your colon removed. And once you have something removed, or not colon, full digestive tract, somewhere along the way, could be the small intestine, then you'll have another. It's twice as likely you'll have it again. And so at this point, I forgot to say, when he was finally diagnosed and scoped that day, when they said to do Humira, he had 8 inches of narrowed intestine, and he had ulcers and granulomas. So we were like, we are not going to let that happen to you. I will do whatever it takes. I'm going to be a mama bear. And I just happened to be positioned in a very good position, having done this IIN class, and I'd actually done Andrea Nakayama's class for the digestive tract, because I had just had half of mine taken out. And so I was kind of in high alert. And then, like I said, my 2 other family members had issues. So I kind of got pushed into here. This is where you make lemonade out of lemons, because you're like, well, I'm going to be living this life for a while. Maybe I can help others, or maybe we can make a little bit of money to help pay for some of the medical bills.
But you started researching, and that became invaluable.
Correct. And then when you know something wonderful, you have to share.
Right.
And we even have stuff for like pages for essential oils, and we wrote those down. And so then we do these fancy tests by Genova, and we looked for alternative medicine doctors. And I didn't stay with just one doctor. So he had a pediatrician doctor. He had a GI that we finally found that would allow him to try diet. They didn't believe it would work, but they said, we've tried it with one other patient. They're also taking medicine. We'll let you try it for 2 months. He needs to start prednisone now. You can try it for 2 months, and then we'll put him on to the next medicine. And we were able to keep him off that next medicine. So he did the prednisone, and we transferred to diet. And it was really, really neat, because then I wrote the book, and we brought all this information, and she saw us frequently, because that first year or 2, while they're trying to get a hold of, is this a severe case or not a severe case? What way is it going to happen? You see your doctor probably every, I think we saw every 2 months, so it's quite a bit. And she was seeing that he was progressing and feeling better and not losing weight. We weren't having this struggle. They don't want to have it be too big of a struggle between the parents to implement the diet. They don't want to see that the child loses weight. And I had heard of, I think it's called medical kidnapping. I don't know, what's it called? So if the parent isn't doing the right by the child, that they can take the job. So we were
You read about those things every once in a while in the newspaper.
I don't know how common it is, but I was like, you know, I'm going to document. We took muscle girth and stuff, so that if he lost weight, we could like say, oh, well, probably it's water weight. It's probably from his belly. He was probably bloated, and different things like that. So we just started thinking, what could we use? And we ended up doing these functional medicine tests, which are by Genova, and they tell you which species of gut bacteria lives in your bowel, and if you have any parasites. So I thought that was really helpful, because my son was taking some probiotics, and we didn't know how to trace it, but most Crohn's patients have too little, half the normal amount of population of gut bacteria. we were able to get him to where he was actually just a little bit over the normal population.
Wow.
So I went and did all the different tests and research. Well, what does that even do? I don't even know what that bacteria does or what affects it or what makes it go away or make it more if I want more of it. So we would get on PubMed and GreenMed Info were my two favorite research sites, which are open. You can get a lot of information to the public that way. And so that's what this wonderful book does. When we sent him one to school, two of the handouts that I love that are actually at his one that's locked down in South Carolina right now are these 3 full pages that you can get at a nursing store or a college bookstore that has nutrient deficiencies, and then what are vitamin and minerals that you need. And they have all these different pages so you can know, hey, you know, I think for the small intestine you need more iron, it gets absorbed there, or B12 gets absorbed there. So if you have an issue there, we need to give you a little extra. Different wonderful things like that. And let me see.
And he was able to go off to college, and he was able to thrive.
He did. He's a freshman. He's finishing up his last 2 or 3 weeks right now. And he was away until the COVID-19, which luckily we've researched a lot about that. And I have little goodies to tell you about that. But I wanted to say 2 more tabs were alternative medicine, where we had researched red light therapy. Red light therapy is supposed to help with viruses, believe it or not. They use it for horses they've used it for a horse on the carotid artery, just a red light to help with the Zika virus in a horse. And then, so we have alternative stuff even like that. And then we had a section for food reactions or flare reactions. What did you eat before the flare, and or what's a sensitivity look like? Is it brain fog? Is it itchy skin? Did you have any of those signs before the flare?
Did you do the Genova sensitivity test?
I don't know if we did Genova's, but we've done an Alcott one, and we've done 2 others. But
Yeah, I did the Genova, and finding what 18 foods triggered my flares was worth its weight in gold. I went from horrific pain to some pain, but most of it was gone, like within a matter of weeks.
Not cool.
I was amazed.
It is so great. It does matter.
I think we froze.
Yes, it does matter what we eat. There you go. I see you now. And then let's see. So Mason we went with diet, and I wrote a song for it. One day I just woke up because our doctor, like I said, you can try the diet. We'll catch you with the medicine when you fall. And I just woke up in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. I said, oh no, it happened to me. I have an ache in my belly. The doctor said it was time for me to use diet to get healthy. I just was not going to tolerate her saying, we're not going to let you have a fight between your kids. And so my son wanted Snapchat, and I thought he was way too young. Anyways, the deal was, if you cheat on this diet, no Snapchat. And so he didn't cheat, but he also learned that every time he would eat something, he usually ended up in the emergency room that summer. It was really
If
tough.
he didn't eat what was good for him.
Right. But even what was good for him was just rice. It was beans. It was popcorn. It wasn't like, oh, you're eating really artificially colored, terrible stuff. It was stuff that most people could eat. We ended up on the specific carbohydrate diet. And so there's a song and video. Cheryl might be able to give you a link. And that's free, and it shows.
I'll put it on my page under our interviews so that people can find it, because it's adorable.
Yeah, it's just panning through what you can eat, what you can buy off the counter, but the goal is to change the gut bacteria. They're saying that there's certain gut bacteria that's out of balance, which we told you Crohn's has a different amount than a normal patient, and those bacteria eat the food and then outgas and cause the bloating and the stretching and the pain and such. So we picked, like I said, specific carbohydrate diet, which limits lactose, which is a milk sugar, grains, all grains, and starch, which is also people think of it like a grain, and basically polysaccharides is what we did. And so, as I had said before, my son wants to go to college out of state, and I said, keep dreaming, we'll see what happens. And we had gotten a dog right before he was diagnosed that May. So in April, we had gotten a dog, a puppy for my daughter, but we just decided, what if we could keep him out of the hospital? He was really in pain. And before we thought we could keep him out, we thought, what if he could have a therapy dog? What if he could just be hugging this dog? Because he'd be there for 3 hours with no pain medicine. Because he was in 2 weeks before. We don't want to make a opioid addict out of this kid. Right. And so they wanted to make sure that we had waited and weren't just giving him pain meds. So we looked into therapy dog training. And then I saw a friend who had seizures, had their dog in the emergency room. And I thought, yeah, because therapy dogs have contracts with different hospitals. You can't just, even if my son was staying there as a patient, doesn't mean it's my dog's rotation to be in the hospital, et cetera, et cetera. So my dog would have to be a service dog in order to even give him a comfort. And we're like, what service can a dog provide? We had heard that they could start smelling bodily functions like diabetes and cancer. And I'm like, well, he could tell your kid if they were having a flare, but if you already had the flare and you're in the hospital, I mean, technically we could bring the dog, but it doesn't really help us. We're still in the hospital. We prefer to not be in the hospital.
Let me explain quickly. A flare is where you suddenly get excess inflammation that's going on in your body that causes all kinds of body reactions. I still get flares even though I have no pain. When I get a flare now, I can gain 7 pounds overnight. But when I was getting flares back when I first found out I had autoimmune disease, they came with a tremendous amount of pain. So for years, your son probably, when he got a flare, was having all kinds of gastro issues with the flare. Flares are things that are triggered, that trigger inflammation in the body. And I believe that inflammation is at the core of all of our chronic illnesses now that I've done all the research that I've done. So it's really important that you keep the flares as low as possible because they're doing harm to your body while they're flaring, as well as making your body darned uncomfortable.
Yes, 100%. And what was interesting is once we researched this diet that was just taking off for children, Dr. Susskind was helping promote it, is now we've come around to find out that 92% of Crohn's patients have positive results from this specific carbohydrate diet. And like 87, it might be a little bit lower, between 75 and 87% for ulcerative colitis can have, where they don't have symptoms from this diet.
Which is huge, huge.
Yeah, it's huge. Food, right? Because the medicines only have to be 50, 53%. We're getting big numbers. And so
from food.
It's been wonderful. So we ended up training our dog to smell in this book, it says maybe 13 different grains and starch, but since then they've learned quite a bit more. And this was a community book because we ended up, this is our dog Stella, and then her little sister, who we trained and gave away to a friend. It's a great story. All the proceeds of this book pays for this dog and any future dogs we train to pass on. Then we have an emotional support dog. So if anybody, people with autoimmune diseases can also have mood disorders because a lot of autoimmune diseases start from leaky guts, and leaky guts is where we make our serotonin and our dopamine and everything in our gut. And so a lot of people
cause mood issues.
So we thought, well, this is great. And we'll have many, many different authors in here. So there's actually 9 vignettes, I guess, in here, and explaining from the people training the dog and giving it away and playing with it every day before they sell the dog, to us hosting a dog that we gave away, and how we trained our dog, and our dog helped to train the other dog just by modeling great behavior. And I was going to see if you would want, we have a big YouTube 20-minute dog mentorary on YouTube for this. So once you find the food video, you'll be able to watch this video.
So these dogs actually can be handed a food that you give them, and they have been trained to respond if it's something that will harm your son or harm another person, because it's something that that person is very sensitive to, that will cause inflammation and a flare.
Right.
So it's huge that the dogs can do this.
It's wonderful. It's been huge. And my daughter's allergic to raw egg whites. So we taught the dog a certain alert for my daughter's condition. And we taught her a different alert for everything that my son can't have. So it's not a matter of, oh, is it exactly corn or wheat or oat? I don't care. He can't have it. So tell me it's for him. He can't have it. So I have the next dog in line that we're training, Captain. And I'm going to see if I can get him and show you that he proofed what Stella does. And so we were able to teach more than one, because at first we were told it can't be done, what we're doing. It's way too many food groups and it just can't be done. And then, well, we've done it twice and we're looking forward to getting to help another family out. The dog's are already almost ready to be taken home. They could be taken home in the next 2 weeks. So we're excited for that. Okay, if you wait a minute, I will run and look.
Okay, and I'll talk while you go.
Okay.
One of the things that I love that her son learned is how to be his own advocate. So he's now a big believer, partly out of self-defense, that he needs to stay away from certain foods. So he was able to go to the East Coast for college because he knows what he has to do for himself. They have instilled all those skills in him, and he didn't have to go with the dog. He got to go and just be his own advocate. And that's what I want all of you to gain from these interviews that I'm doing with people who got sick, took responsibility for their own health and made lifestyle changes so that they could live powerful lives on their own. And her son is able to do that. He's able to live on the East Coast and go to college like every other child.
I'll have to have you tilt it back down. There you go. This is Victor. He actually helped write the book about the emotional support dog. So he's
Fabulous.
helping me. He's helping us all out for this whole COVID situation. But I wanted to show you, this is an apple. So he would give an all clear for an apple. Like a box of macaroni, he would give an alert to. This soup, we're expecting an alert. The reason I'm showing you like this is so you can't think I'm leading the witness. This is a food my son could have had, except for that it has maple syrup. But if it didn't, he could have it. It doesn't have anything else, so it should be an all clear. And an all clear would be just looking up at me, and an alert would be a paw. And then we went on to this honey. See all this runny honey? That is most likely a corn syrup or rice syrup, which would then also be a grain. And this is a honey that should be an all clear.
That's natural.
See, it's all crystallized. It doesn't run. So.
And most honey sold in the stores has corn syrup in it. So I want to flag that for all of you, because it's not, corn syrup's not good for you, and it's genetically modified.
You can squirt on a bun. It's not pure honey. All right, let's see what Captain can do. Will you send me, will you pass me this? Yeah, thanks.
And genetically modified means it has Bt toxin in it. So you want to stay away from that. Okay,
this is just freeze-dried turkey, but it should be an let's see. Come here, Brandon, come here. Okay, check for starch. So this is a food he'd like, and so you'd think he'd beg for it. All clear, good boy. So even though it's his dog food, I'm showing that it's not a begging situation. Okay. Check for starch. Yes!
Yes.
Good starch. I was watching the TV to see if you could see it, so I couldn't have been alerting to that. All right, here we go. Captain. Okay. Check for starch. Good, all clear. That's a good boy. Okay. Can you check this? I don't have a name for that because corn soup wasn't one of my names, but they smell the corn because so many products had corn.
Wow.
This one only has tapioca starch. Yeah. Check for starch. Yes. So it's like one of the very last ingredients because it's bone broth, dehydrated. Yeah. But any little bit of starch feeds the bad bacteria. And then we have to check for starch. Good, all clear. Get to the rock star. And we have one more. We got the other honey. Check for starch. Good, all clear. So
Is that
is,
incredible or what?
fun stuff. I
And
don't
she
know.
explains all this in the book that she showed you of Dogs and Vests.
Yes.
But you had a little girl that you trained a dog for in the beginning as well,
Yes.
who was very ill. So
Yeah.
why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, she did so well. And Victor knows Karis got to help write the book, and she has had like 3 or 4 sleepovers. She had never had a sleepover by age 15, but the dog has saved her. And now the dog tells on her. So sometimes teenagers, they don't want to listen to the dog. And I know our trainer will teach them to, if it's a boy handler, to get them in a spot that will be very painful while they're sitting there playing video games to make sure they go. But if Karis is too tired because she has adrenal insufficiency to go, then and get help or get her medicine or whatever, the dog will then go search the house and find the help and tell on her. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So the dog actually wasn't formally trained for me to do that, but it learned that it was necessary. So that was, her name's Maisie. Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I hate to do this, but we are out of time. And
Okay.
I am so grateful that you have shared all of this. I fell in love both with the way Marion organized her binder so that she could keep her son safe, and all the work and the research that she did on herself and her son so that they could be healthy and live normal lives. And then she took it to the next level by training dogs to find sensitivities, which I think is truly amazing. And I wanted you all to hear her story because you can own your own life and you can create miracles. And
Yes.
that's the lesson I want you to learn from this.
Thank you.
She created miracles for her family.
Thank you. And
So thank you for being here with us
if
today.
you want, yeah, we just are so thankful for you too and like-minded. And I think we're gonna start, like they were trying, a food revolution and a medical revolution.
And food is medicine. So if anybody tells you food is not medicine, that's the moral of this story. Food can make you sick as heck or it can make you well. And so the first line of defense is always going to be food. And don't let anybody tell you different.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. Thank you so much for joining me here today.